Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. It's a pleasure to see you here at the Opera Center. My name is Mark Skorka. I'm president of Opera America, and we are delighted to have another iteration of our Conversations program this evening with the incomparable Jamie Barton. Conversations are just that, casual discussions with luminaries in our field who have the ability to give us insight not only into their careers as important artists, but particularly giving us an insight into how their careers began. These are professional development tools that are archived on our YouTube channel so that young aspiring singers can watch the stories of some of the great masters and how they developed and continue to nurture their careers even as successful artists. As you know, we have a virtual audience. This is live streamed to an audience around the world, and we welcome our virtual audience. It's also, these programs are archived on our YouTube channel. You all here in the room are invited to a casual reception after the conversation. Unfortunately, those who are watching via live stream will have to eat on their own. I have a couple of promotional details to share with you. You'll see, of course, the brochure about our entire onstage series. This lists all of the conversations, the emerging artist recitals, as well as the Creators in Concert program. We also wanted to draw your attention to our new opera showcase that takes place on January 13th at Town Hall. This is a full orchestral and choral reading of extended excerpts from 5 new operas that are in development. And we will have a reading of them during our New Works Forum up at Town Hall. Some of you may have attended the performance at Trinity Church last year, but we completely sold it out. So we've moved to a larger venue in Midtown, Town Hall, on January 13 of 2017. So you can hear some of the most important works in development today at that wonderful historic facility. And I will point out that 3 of the composers are women, some of whom have been funded through our Female Composer Grant Program. Indeed. But on with the business for this evening. Jamie Barton has been called this is a quote, a great artist, no question, with an it's steadiness of tone. My mouth just wasn't working around it today. And a nobility of utterance that invites comparison not so much with her contemporaries as with mid-20th century greats such as Kirsten Flagstad. You can't have a better comparative analysis than that. So if you will join me, please, let's welcome Jamie Barton. Hello there. So good to see you.
Good to
Please
be here.
Have a seat.
Hey, everybody.
We had the pleasure a second ago of watching on video your performance at this year's Richard Tucker Gala.
Oh, yeah.
And it was absolutely spectacular. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I always start my interviews by asking the question, who brought you to your first opera?
Actually, I think it was my best friend in high school. We had a really great music school in our hometown called Shorter College. And they were doing Così fan tutte. And my best friend was like, do you want to come along? I'm going to go check this out. We were musical theater buffs. And so I was like, sure. And we went along. And
where is this hometown?
Rome, Georgia.
Rome, Georgia. So
Yeah.
what was the hometown opera company?
There wasn't one. Not at all. Atlanta Opera would have been the closest. And I consider Atlanta Opera my hometown company.
But where was this Così fan tutte?
It was at Shorter College. It was
Shorter College.
a college production of the great classic.
Were you already studying music in high school?
I was, in as far as choir and piano lessons and that sort of thing. I wasn't really doing voice lessons until I got to college. And I went to Shorter College for my undergraduate degree. But, yeah.
Did that first opera experience awaken a sense that I want to do this, or was it just a nice evening in the theater?
I'm not going to lie, it was kind of a boring evening in the theater.
Okay.
No, but it taught me. I was already really interested in choral music, really interested in the concert rep. There was this wonderful mezzo-soprano named Kelly Jenkins, who is now the wife of Christian Van Horn, so she's Kelly Van Horn. But she was also at Shorter College, and I heard her sing, and I went, I want to do that. Like, I hope I have a voice like hers. Mm-hmm. Hilariously enough, she's a mezzo, and I had no clue what I was at the time, but apparently I'm a mezzo too, so it worked out.
And then you went to college.
Yes.
To study what?
Started out in music education for about a month. And discovered rather quickly that I liked the idea of teaching somebody one-on-one, but the idea of teaching a high school or a middle school or an elementary school class just wasn't really making me totally happy. And so I switched over to vocal performance with the blessings and encouragement of my family and friends.
So to vocal performance, because your voice is not one that hides. When did you realize that, or when did someone share with you that you really have a gift?
Well, that would be my first voice teacher, Dr. Brian Horne.
At college?
Yeah, at college. He was my first voice teacher from the time we started at Shorter College, all the way through Shorter College, and then unbeknownst to me, I was auditioning for Indiana University for my master's degree, and he put in for his for a spot on the faculty, and we both got in.
Really?
So I ended up going to Indiana and following him, and I was with him for another year until he encouraged me to go find new ears to teach me. And
that marks a good teacher who is willing to let go a promising student because he probably felt he had done for you what he could.
Well, I think in his words, it was just time to hear the lessons from a different person. And it was a really wonderful thing to be able to be with him for the first year at a huge school, because Shorter was about that big. It was very, very tiny, a strong music school, but a very small place. And Indiana was a huge place. I think when I was there, in total, like graduate, undergraduate, doctoral, like ABD people teaching outside who haven't quite gotten their degree but are still, pursuing. I think it was around 500 students in the voice department. So that is going from, a puddle to the Pacific. But it was wonderful to have that year to look at the faculty and go, okay, who am I going to get along with? Who teaches in the way I'd like to? I was really interested in studying with a mezzo-soprano, and I met Marianne Hart, and we just hit it off. It had to happen.
And I rarely get into a pedagogical conversation, but what were you looking for in a teacher? How did you like to be taught voice?
So Dr. Brian Horne is very much so a pedagogue, the scientist of the voice, and I'm a bit of a nerd. And was always very, very interested in that as well. But what I wanted in going to a new teacher was somebody who is also a pedagogue, somebody who's an eternal student, continues to learn, continues to figure out different ways to describe how to make this do what it naturally does, and also somebody who hopefully was my voice type. And luckily I found that in Marianne. She's fantastic.
And I do hear that we have a little speaker hush, and I can't tell where it's coming from. But
I know. I'm like, is it me?
They'll come from backstage and rescue us in some fashion. So did you, because I know from our singer training forum that there's a big difference between sort of vocal performance and opera performance. So did you, when you went to Indiana, you wanted to be an opera singer?
Well, I was a little shy about it, actually. I loved performing on stage, but I was still at that point in my voice and the learning of my voice that I didn't quite feel comfortable yet when it came to opera stuff. If I was looking through the Mezzo Bible trying to find an aria, anything that had notes above the staff, automatically out. Which is hilarious when I look back on it now. All of a sudden I was singing Voi che sapete, and nowadays it sounds like Voltrauta singing Voice-Sepete. You know, that was never meant for me. But I was so scared of the higher part of my voice, and I didn't know what to do with the lower part. I did come from choral singing, so there was a little bit of the mixing down of the head voice all the way down that I was just used to doing, and hadn't really learned to explore. I think in a mezzo voice, there are different vocal flavors that happen. You know, there really is a chest register. There is the middle, and then there is the high. And so it was learning what those were. But that came with time. I honestly didn't really get comfortable with that until I'd say my last year of Houston Grand Opera Studio.
And I wanted to ask you about going from Indiana to the HGO studio. And the Houston Grand Opera Studio is one of the finest young artist programs at any opera company in the United States.
Yeah.
Did you go right from IU to HGO?
I did. I have to say that last semester of school was intense. It was magical, actually. That was the semester that I sang for Marilyn Horne on her week at Carnegie. So that was a week. I did the Houston Grand Opera Studio competition. I did... Awesome. Your fault.
I know, it's my fault.
I did the Houston Grand Opera competition and got third in that. I did the Met auditions, and I also left 2 weeks early to go to Opera Theater of St. Louis. So out of 14 weeks of school, I missed 5 of those 14 weeks. So it was an intense semester.
You may have entered IU uncertain about a career in opera, but you left IU with a career in opera really quite open in front of you.
Well, at least the opportunity to jump in and, you know, swim or sink.
Now, young artist programs are, in a certain way, known to shy away from unique voices, from big voices. Did you feel that the Young Artist Program at HGO gave you what you needed as an individual artist?
Absolutely, absolutely. They had, at the time, and I think still, Houston is, to me, very much so a home company, and I love what they do. But when I was there, they took a chance on a singer who was barely starting to understand what was going on, but had potential. And they took me in the same year as they took another mezzo in, and they also had another mezzo in the studio. So here is an opera studio, which is generally, 8 to 10 students, and 3 of them were mezzos. There weren't enough roles to go around. They literally said, we can only give you third lady and the magic flute. That's all we've got for you. But we can give you training and concert opportunities, and we can come up with other things throughout the year if you'll come. And I thought, well, yeah, absolutely. I love concert. Concert was always really interesting, and really, it was a really good way to avoid having to sing arias for a long time.
And what did you sing at Opera Theater of St. Louis in that little interim?
Oh, man. Now, I was actually there for 4 years. 2 years as a young artist.
So you were a young artist at Opera
Yes. That was my very first professional job. They were the first ones to do that. And half the reason I took the audition, or that I signed up for an audition with Opera Theater of St. Louis, was because they would let you bring an art song for the audition. So I didn't have to have 5 arias. My voice teacher made me learn 5 arias by putting me in the Met competition. So that's kind of how she kicked me out of the nest. But yeah, the first, well, quite honestly, the first year at Opera Theater of St. Louis, we deemed it Opera Theater of St. Leisure. Because I literally was on stage for one role, which wasn't a role, it was just a chorus part that was glorified in Street Scene, the dowdy woman. And I covered Elizabeth Sorensen doing the crazy lady in the attic, Mrs. Rochester, in Jane Eyre, the operatic version. And that was my first year. But they were the first company to give me a role, and that was Anina in Traviata with the wonderful Dimitri Pitas and Eileen Perez. So, I mean, hello.
Good casting. Good casting.
Yeah.
How fabulous. Now, you, of course, won the Met audition in 2007.
10 years ago. Almost 10 years.
Don't
Well,
rush it.
this season, 10 years.
Where in this Opera Theatre of St. Louis 4 years, or in the HGO studio, where did that occur?
That occurred in that final semester at Indiana University.
So you won the Met auditions that final semester?
Yeah. Now, I had been to Opera Theatre St. Louis this season, the summer prior.
Mm-hmm.
And so my second time there was directly after all of that.
Were the two arias you sang in the final concert two arias that you still own?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Witch's aria is something I'll never let go of. I love it. My claws are in it. Don't even try to fight me. Like, I just, I love it. That role is just one that I love so much. And I finally got to do Cornelia this last year in Frankfurt, in a wonderful production of Giulio Cesare. So, yeah, very much so.
What is amazing, but it's not amazing given your talent, is that you went through school, into young artist programs, into your career rather seamlessly.
Seemingly so. But I have to tell you that the last year in Houston, when I left the studio, I had 2 gigs for the next year. That was it. Now, granted, those 2 gigs were at the Met and Carnegie Hall. So,
Not bad.
Not bad. But it wasn't going to pay the bills. But, do I borrow your...
I'm not sure. They will give us some more instructions soon, I'm sure.
We'll give it over.
Good.
So, not even on.
We have good acoustics in the room.
It's true. And I am an opera singer. Let's see, what was the question?
So you still own the arias from the
Yes.
Met competition, the Cornelia, and the Witches aria.
Yeah.
But the seamlessness of the career.
Oh, yeah,
So you had 2
yeah.
gigs, Carnegie Hall and the Met.
Yeah, and the next year came around and it built onto that. Things started dropping in, as is wont to do if you're lucky enough to be on a roster that has older people of your voice type. A lot of times things will fall in your lap. You know, you pick up the gigs that other people can't or don't want to do. Mm-hmm. And so it did pick up. But definitely heading out of HGO, I was going, oh man, this is going to be hard.
And how long was it? Did you live in New York? Did you stay with family?
I was living in Houston at the time, actually. Lived there for 2 years more, and then moved to Atlanta to be closer to family and a really good airport.
And they have encouraged you through the whole career path?
Yeah, I honestly think my family has been, in the beginning it was a mix of very proud and very confused. But the confused melted away after they figured out that I really love what I do, and they were like, we don't understand it, but we love that you love it, and it's really cool to get to see you do this. So, yeah.
So I wanted to chat for a while about competitions.
Yeah.
And you didn't spend probably a lot of time on the competition circuit because your career began to take off. But nonetheless, the Met Opera Council in 2007, the BBC Cardiff Singer of the Year in 2014, the Richard Tucker Award in 2015. Your career, 2014-2015, were already booming, but these awards must really mean something to a young singer on the rise.
Oh yeah. Well, the Met competition was completely and totally unexpected. I didn't know what I was doing, by the way. I had never seen an opera at the Metropolitan Opera before I got there for the week for the competition. The first thing I ever saw there was Traviata with Krasimira Stoyanova and Jonas Kaufmann, who at the time was fairly unknown. Luckily, I had other competitors who are now very dear friends of mine that were in similar positions, and we just ran around the opera house going, oh my God, oh my God!
Had you ever sung in a space that large?
Actually, funny fact, Indiana University's Opera Theater is the size of the Met plus 1 square foot. This is what I've been told. So kind of. I had sung on a stage at least that was that big. The house, not nearly as big.
Okay.
But I mean, especially that year, it was the Zeffirelli Traviata set that we sang on. I mean, man.
Had you sung at that point with a full big orchestra?
I had at Indiana University. My first opera role ever there, or really ever with an orchestra and in language, was Tisbe in Cenerentola. I did Ned Rorem's Our Town and HMS Pinafore and Hansel and Gretel as well there. But those were the 4 opportunities I got before I was up there with the Met Orchestra, pretending like I knew what the hell I was doing.
That must have just been a frightening experience.
It was exciting.
Yeah.
It was a little bit frightening, but it was more exciting. I don't know.
Well, that makes you a born performer. That kind of spotlight and that sort of challenge isn't daunting, but is in fact exciting to you.
Yeah, no. I always say that the most nervous day that I get in my job isn't the performance days at all. Like that's fun. The nerve-wracking days are the first day of rehearsal, first day of school, and the Sitzprobe, because that's the first day with the orchestra. And once I'm through those firsts, then I'm like, okay, we know each other, we know what we sound like, we're good.
So how, in this arc of your development, from being a concert singer to being a bit of a stage animal, how did that transition occur?
Well, Mark, I think I was always a stage animal.
We just had to unwrap it.
It's true. Well, like I said, I started in musical theater. That was my original love. And it took a little while to find my place in opera vocally. But yeah, concert was kind of an education into that space.
Okay. Well, good.
But yeah, it was definitely a fun transition, finally getting to the place where I could have a lot of fun with the vocal roles and not really have to be so worried of if I could do them, quite honestly.
And what does one have to go through to win the Cardiff Singer of the Year?
Blood, sweat, tears, all of it. No, it's a competition that I had really wanted to try my hand at for a long time. I had put my name, you have to be nominated at least, or you had to be nominated when I did it. And my name had been in the hat for the 2 previous competition years. And I auditioned for them and didn't get through. But you do that audition. My year it became a DVD round, the first one. Second round was right here at the National Opera Center, singing the Witch's Aria, of all things. And then if you make it past the live audition, then they say, congratulations, you're in, you're gonna come, and then you get to do the competition. And the competition consists of an initial heat, and then the finals if you make it through. And that's double if you choose to do the song competition. So, a lot to go through to get there.
How exciting, how exciting. Repertoire. And in scanning the short bio on your website, Elizabeth Proctor in The Crucible of Robert Ward, Eboli, Verdi's greatest role, Fricka, Cornelia in Julius Caesar. I think of Christa Ludwig doing Verdi, Wagner, and Handel. She didn't do Robert Ward. When I think of singers from the last generation, a lot of them really specialized in a narrow niche, and you are doing anything but that. How do you think about your repertoire?
Well, quite honestly, I think of it when it comes through in an offer a little bit, but I'm really not specifically drawn to the kinds of music, the kinds of composers as much as I am the stories, and how the music feeds those stories to make it powerful. And so you just named a list of ladies that the composers just elevated these stories to godlike heights, and I'm lucky that I have been given the opportunity to do them. So I try my hand at it and I see if it works. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Does one niche in this repertoire fit you better, either temperament or just the vocal instrument? Is there, you wish you had more Verdi offers or more Wagner offers? Is there a preference that you have?
You know, I'm going to name two, actually. Wagner, who I've discovered is a great love of my life. And then I would say Baroque.
Really?
Would be the other thing. I love singing Baroque music. It's something that I've done since concert days, and something that I find endless fascination with in terms of trying to do the style, figuring out different ways. You know, Handel is different from Monteverdi, is different from Purcell. I'm just a nerd when it comes to this stuff. But I feel like it's something that is a bit of a vocal home, and I do wish, as you said, I wish I had more opportunities to do it.
I wish more companies performed that repertoire.
Yeah, me
it's
too.
And that kind of repertoire will keep your voice healthy after doing Wagner, to be able to then come and do something where you have to move the voice.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, for me, the two kinds of music that do that are Baroque and bel canto. Those are the two, for me, that really kind of streamline everything. And then I get to go, scream in glorious wonder and Wagner and Verdi for a little bit, hopefully in the right technique. But
do you have vocal role models?
Oh gosh, yes. Oh gosh, okay.
So when you take out the Ouija board and say, how should I approach this B flat? Who do you channel?
Well, it depends on what composer wrote that B flat and how the approach is going. But I would say, oh man, I have a trifecta that I go towards for opera things, particularly. Marilyn Horne, for sure. A lot of, I feel like there are similarities in how our voices are built. And so I can usually glean a little bit of a voice lesson from listening to her, quite honestly. Dolores Zajic, in some of the bigger, like, oh my gosh, I'm singing this kind of things. And then, to be quite honest, my all-around, like, this is kind of a vocal idol for me in so many ways, and in career ways and personal ways as well, as Stephanie Blythe. She is the person who I really feel the most similar to. Now, there are other people as well. If I'm going into the concert rep, you better believe I'm looking into some Janet Baker and some Christa Ludwig. There are many others that I go to, but that for opera, that's kind of my trifecta.
And it's nice that you can also talk to those people. You
I
use
know.
the Ouija board.
Well, I think when I first was getting to know Stephanie Blythe, I kind of wished I had a Ouija board there, because I think I felt like I was dying. Just, like, she's still the kind of person, and we're friends, and we see each other every once in a while. We go out for dinners every once in a while, but she's still just she means so much to me personally, and I know, to this career as a whole, the respect for her is on a monumental level, and so I get around her and my voice just disappears.
It's a wonderful tribute. When you're thinking about taking on a new role, you of course look at the music, you look at the story. Do you talk to people? Do you get advice from people?
Absolutely.
Who do you talk to?
Oh man. Well, I talk to a lot of performers. If I know that somebody has done this role before, especially if it's an older generation, one or two removed from me, then I like to talk to them to see what their experiences have been. But then I also kind of have what I have coined my board of directors, which is a very small group of people who I kind of take all of the decisions to that might have any question mark over them whatsoever.
And then when you're preparing a role, do you start with the text, do you start with the music? How do you prepare? Do you play the piano for yourself in preparing a role?
A little bit here and there. My first kind of go-to is actually listening to recordings from way back when, all the way up to now, trying to get a feel for the language, if it's a new language especially. Ježibaba is right now on my mind because I'm learning that right now.
In Rusalka.
Rusalka, yes. And so learning Czech along with a brand new role, it's nice to listen to Czech singers sing this text. But really, to me, the first step is getting in there and just doing my grunt work highlighting, the translating, the transliterating. I go through and I'm like a conductor. I color code every dynamic, and quite honestly, to me, it helps me be able to look at the score and not have to pay attention to all the little black lines. If I see that there's a piano coming up or a forte, I know the piano is circled in blue and forte is circled in red. And so, it's just a quick way of doing that. For some reason, that really helps me get like super acquainted with the score. The next thing for me is the text. I'm the kind of musician who the music is an extra added on to the story, but the story is from the text. And if you have a really good composer, then they also storytell through their music. But then the last step for me is the music. It's figuring out how I'm going to be a storyteller with my voice in this particular score. And one of the really important steps, which I just left out, is that I stop listening to recordings at about midway through really getting into the text. Because I'm a good oral listener or a learner. I don't want to start emulating other people. But those are kind of my steps.
And when does a pianist coach come into it?
Usually fairly late. I don't like, there have been times where I've been like, right, I have 5 minutes and I've got to learn this role. So, hi, could you play through this and help me learn it? That has happened every once in a while just due to time constrictions. But a lot of times, most of the time I don't feel good taking it to a coach until it is learned. Until I can go in there and I know what the language means, what the structure means, I know that I'm doing everything dynamically correct. I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist in that, and I take it to that place, the perfectionist place, and then I relax back into it and add the character on. So that's the place in the learning process that I like to bring in a coach. To whether it be a director coach, which I work with sometimes just to get ideas about what the character could be, or a vocal coach to get better ideas about the style, about the language, that kind of thing.
Do you still take voice lessons?
Oh, yes. Yes.
And I think a lot of people would be surprised, especially young singers, that someone of your accomplishment and attainment still takes voice lessons.
Listen, I think it is my impression and certainly my own thing. It doesn't matter if you own a Maserati, you're still going to need a tune-up every once in a while. And especially for a vocalist, and especially I think for somebody at my age, moving through the voice solidifying, bringing on new types of roles, bringing on quite honestly, new calibers of roles. When I bring on Eboli, I will luckily be with my voice teacher. So, it's important to have somebody who is outside of the actual body of the instrument to be able to listen and say, this is what you can do to make this easier. This is what you can do to tweak this. And I still actually, I'm still in contact with all three of the voice teachers that I've had in my lifetime, but I study mostly with Stephen King down in Houston. And it's so important. I actually haven't been to see him in over a year now, and I miss him. It's just time. It's time to just get the checkup. I think it's important.
Recital work. You also are a recitalist, and we'll talk about your CD in a couple of minutes. What does recital work do for you as an artist?
It gives me every option of choosing every aspect, and I love that. I'm a bit of a control freak in that way. Recitals, I should say, being that I went to a very small undergrad, we didn't really have the budget for an opera program. We didn't. They did musical theater, and so I did a little bit of that, but the real way in which we got experience was by getting up in front of our fellow students and doing recitals. So from the very genesis of my vocal study, I have been doing recitals. This is something very familiar to me. I love them. I love being able to look out in the audience and see people's faces and connect on a personal level. And I love being able to take these songs that are 3, 4, 5 minutes long, and it's a little story that you get to tell, and then you move on to the next story. And it's like story hour. I love being in the audience for this kind of thing too.
I think it was in a conversation we had with Stephanie Blythe,
Yeah.
who said, when you're an opera artist, a director tells you where to move,
Yep.
a costumer tells you what to wear, the makeup artists make you look however they want to, the conductor cues you to come in and sets the tempo, and that to develop, and she used the word autonomy, to develop her autonomy as an artist, where she's choosing the repertoire, she's choosing the dress, she's choosing her hand movements or other aspects of her performance. Do you find that autonomy is challenging? Does it inform what you bring to staged opera?
Well, absolutely. I think, you know, in having that kind of autonomy in recital music, it absolutely feeds who you are as an opera singer. I find more often than not, there are some opera situations where you go in, you have anywhere from, you know, a couple of weeks or maybe even just 3 days to put an opera together before it goes up. And at that point, you're doing what was done. You're kind of rinse, repeat, we're doing this again. But with new productions or with productions that have a little bit of time in the rehearsal, you're really getting to connect with a director and with different colleagues and the conductor. And that really, I think when you are able to bring that autonomy to the table in that situation, it makes for an interesting story, a unique telling of something we've all probably heard a lot, which is kind of the point, I think.
Now, the Vatican of recital giving is Wigmore Hall in London, and you recently made your Wigmore Hall recital debut.
Yes, I did.
And the rave review that I read at the beginning, except for one word which I couldn't pronounce, it was a rave review of that Wigmore Hall recital.
Yeah.
So, how did it come about, and was it a nervous moment in your career?
Well, it came about actually from the Cardiff Singer of the World competition. The pianist who I worked with on this last recital tour, his name is James Bailey. He's a South African pianist, a brilliant, brilliant guy, younger than I am, I believe. And Wigmore Hall loves him so much that they gave him his own recital series. And so a couple of years after Cardiff, he called me up and he said, "Hey, I've got this recital series. We both love Charles Ives. Do you want to put together a recital and do it at Wigmore?" And I was like, "Yep." Yes, I would, actually. So it's, this recital tour was kind of born from that, from meeting each other there. I just was in love with how he told stories through the piano keys. And we trusted that we would be able to do this together, and it was a wonderful time. We've been on this recital tour. We had 4 dates beforehand. Actually, the date directly before Wigmore Hall was at Cardiff. It was the first time I had been back since the competition. And James went on to London, that's where he lives, the night of the recital, so on Friday. I took off on Saturday. Our recital was on Sunday at Wigmore. And I got a text from his partner the next morning when I woke up at about 10 o'clock in the morning, saying, "Hi, so we've been in the hospital all night." And James had he had been eating some carrot cake and swallowed a bit of walnut that got stuck in his esophagus. And so they took him to the hospital, and they were doing all these, tests to see if they could get it out. They thought that they were going to have to put him under general anesthesia. And in the end, he was in the hospital from 9 p.m. on Saturday until 1 p.m. on Sunday. And that trooper of a man went home, took a nap, showered, and came into this recital with me. And I had an amazing time with every single recital that we did on that tour, but I'm telling you, there was something special in that night. I don't know what it was, but there was this connection. It was probably part Wigmore, part being in the hospital all night and fearing for your life. But it was an incredible experience.
But that's what artists do for their art. The dedication, the sacrifice of artists for their art. It's a pretty amazing force.
Choke on walnuts for our art.
And it was using that story as a transition because a successful career for someone like you means that you are booked a lot and much of it away from home, that you are in hotels away from home. It was a great year. I didn't see any friends or family. I was in different cities.
Yeah.
How do you keep your buoyant, good spirit in your body?
I will say that is the hardest part of this career. I live in Atlanta still. I happen to have found the condo of my dreams. I'm an hour and a half away from my family. I have a cat. My best friends are in Atlanta, and I see all of those practically none of the time. And I'm lucky to get the opportunity to go out and do this career at that kind of pace. But that being said, it is hard. Now, one of the things that I do that makes me happier, sane, brings more sanity into my life is that I try to bring a little piece of home along with me, whether it be a picture of family or, quite honestly, my cat. And she travels with me. She's here in New York right now. We drove up from Georgia because she doesn't fly yet. But to be able to have her with me is a bit of home. My home to me consists of the actual place, the friends that are around there, and River, my cat. And so if I can't have my actual home along with me or my friends along with me, if I can have River, it helps. This last year I was on the road. I did the math on this actually. For the year of 2016, I will have been home for 55 days. And those are whole days. No, I take that back. Those are partial days, some of them. Some of them are travel days, but 55 out of 365. So, and part of that was a 7-month travel stint in which I did not go home at all. So I had wonderful family and friends who drove her to me in Washington, D.C. My mother and my nephew actually took my car and River and drove all the way from Atlanta, Georgia to Cooperstown, New York for the summer. Came up and visited for a few days and then flew out of Buffalo. And it was the first time my nephew had ridden on a plane, so it was kind of a fun experience for him as well. But you do this with, it takes a village is the phrase that comes to mind. My best friend was in town this last weekend. My mother is surely going to come up for something at some point. She's always traveling here and there for me. It really takes a village to make it feel like home is still accessible, even if you are on the road in a hotel room and God knows where.
And thank heavens for cell phones and Skype and the things that we use now to stay in touch.
I don't actually know how people did it. Like, a long time ago, it was common, I think, for singers to bring their families with them, right? And then came the age of travel, when flights were happening, and this was pre all of the technology that we have now. So all of a sudden, it was easier to go to a gig and not bring your family along, and it's much cheaper. And so that generation particularly, I don't understand how they did it. It's to call your home for even a minute was such an enormous expense. We are so lucky that I can pick up my phone and talk with my boyfriend over FaceTime, or my family, or my cat if I even need to. These are possible. It's amazing to me, and I'm so grateful to be a part of this generation of singers, if for no other reason, and there are plenty of other reasons, but if for no other reason than that.
I don't think people fully understand the sacrifices that successful singers make for their careers. Yes, there's the glamour of the curtain call and the flowers and the standing ovations and all of that is, of course, is a high.
Oh, it's wonderful.
But the day-to-day being away from home is really difficult.
It is, but it helps. Another part of the reason I drive is so I can bring more of my home with me. I love to cook. If I weren't a singer, I'd probably want to be a chef. And so, I bring my Dutch oven braise everything.
So I've seen Beverly Hillbillies going across the animals in the back.
Absolutely.
Jamie's coming to town.
I didn't tell you about my chickens. I've got those with me too.
You like fresh eggs with breakfast. You have a new CD.
I do.
And tell us about, is that your first CD?
It is my first solo album.
And what's on it?
This is a collection of, these are a few of my favorite songs. Mahler, Dvorak, and Sibelius are the composers that are on this. We have the Mahler Rückert-Lieder, the Dvorak Gypsy songs, those are the two groups, and then around them, the Sibelius songs are 6 songs that I picked that are just some of the most stunning songs in the rap.
Those are intense songs, those Sibelius songs.
Ooh, they are not the happiest
No,
texts
they're
in the
not.
world, but they really are some of the most intensely vivid storytelling through music that I know of. And I love every single one of them.
What was it like making a CD? Is it very different from doing a live performance?
Oh yeah, it's a very, very different process. We were actually just up the road at SUNY Purchase, which has an amazing acoustic. And we had the engineer room was down a level where we had my manager and the recording engineer and whoever else was around sitting in there listening to everything intently, you know. And then Brian and I were upstairs on the stage and we were stopping and starting and stopping and starting, and that process went on for several days, and out came this album.
And it must be wonderful to have that document that really gives us your artistry for posterity.
Well, to me, it's such a wonderful. This was a gift from Brian, to be honest. He had a recording deal with Delos, 3 CDs, I think, and he had already done 2 of them, and he invited me along for this. And he really gave me the option. You know, he said, "What do you want to do? What do you want on this CD? What are you passionate about?" And to be able to put this together with Brian, who is one of the great collaborators of our time.
And this is Brian Sieber, who is in charge of the opera program at Juilliard.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was our first time collaborating, actually. We got together several months before the actual recording process to sit down and play through the music and get to know each other as 2 artists. And I walked out of the first day going, "Oh, this is going to be fun."
So if you are called back as a distinguished alumna to IU or the HGO studio, what advice do you give the young singers who look up at you and think, "Wow, I want to be like Jamie Barton"?
Quite honestly, there's kind of 2 pieces of advice. The first piece of advice came from a Verdi soprano who went to my undergrad, actually, Indra Thomas. And she came in and did a master class and talked with us, and she said, and I remembered this and still recall it now, is take your time. Take your time, figure out who you are as an artist. We're in an age where anybody can look up anything on YouTube. You can hear any recording you want to on Spotify. You have access to a vast library of artistry. And the goal isn't to be that. The goal is to tell these stories in a way that connects with the audience, in a way that makes sense to you, not regurgitating, but being your own storyteller. So take your time and figure that out. That's what makes somebody unique in my eyes. When I go and I hear Stephanie Blythe sing, it's not because she's vocally perfect, which is the truth. But it is because every single time I hear her, whether it's in a recording or on stage, I believe every single second of it. I forget everything that I have on my mind, the thousands of things I should be doing, the list of groceries I have to get, whatever. That no matter what gets slid to the side, and I get to spend a couple of hours losing myself in that beauty. And that, to me as an audience member, is what I want to see when I go to a performance. So it is only right that me as an artist strive to provide that for the people who are there. And so for young artists, I say, look for that in yourself. Look for the truth of the story you're going to be telling. Look for that kernel of truth, because they're smart. Audiences are really, really smart. They can sniff out when you're putting something on, when you're not telling the truth, when you're acting like an opera singer on stage. They can see it. It's automatically recognizable. And the only thing that hooks people in this, whether it be the opera goer who has been going since they were a kid and they love it now and they're 110 years old, or whether it be the person who's never seen opera before, is if it gets this little hook into the truth that makes them connect with the words. And so that is the long-winded advice that I would give to a younger singer, is honor that truth and take your time doing it, because this is a marathon of a career. We're not in a sprint. You have time.
Well,
take your time.
Great advice.
Yeah.
We have a few minutes for a couple of questions. So Laura Lee is the mistress of the microphone. And I have a microphone? Okay. Well, I'll restate the questions. We can do it that way. And if we, thank you, bring the lights up a little bit. Questions for Jamie? Yes, please.
So I'm so impressed with how articulate you are, and I can't help thinking that you would be a really good teacher.
Thank
so
you.
I'm wondering if you're interested in that. Do you teach?
So for the live stream, the question is that you are so articulate, and do you think about teaching, since you seem to have this wonderful ability to impart wisdom?
I would love to, is actually the answer. I don't really have the time to do it now, but at some point in my career, I would love to get the opportunity to. Some of my favorite things that I do now are master classes.
I was going to ask if you do,
Yeah.
if you do anything.
I'm starting to do them more often. They're starting to give me, the leash and say, okay, go.
In what circumstance? So if you're at an opera company and they have young artists, those young artists might have a master class with you?
Sometimes. A lot of it is actually based on the recital tours, though. A lot of universities bring in recital tours. And so, for instance, on this last one, I taught at Princeton, and I taught, at Cardiff as well. I'm sure there were more, and I'm forgetting all sorts of things. But I get the opportunity to work with all levels of students there, and I love it. It's so much fun. So I would love to, at some point. That could certainly be a career goal at some point.
25 years from now.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I saw your on Fenena last year, which was absolutely fantastic. And I'm wondering, it seems that there's an obvious happy relationship between you and Sandra Radvanovsky.
No, we hate each other.
And it felt like that came through in the performance, which could very easily have gone into a very adversarial, violent place, given the nature of the story, right?
Yeah, right.
How much did your personal relationship with another performer impact your interpretation of a role, and maybe would that change if you were doing it with a different partner?
Great question about the way the relationship between two singers will have an impact on their performance of an opera. How does that work?
In my experience, I work with many different colleagues. Some of them I am familiar with, like Sandra, like Angela Mead. And others that I'm meeting for the first time, or even working with for a bajillionth time, and we just haven't really gotten to know each other. The difference is that I find it easier to take it that extra step when I know somebody, or at least when we have a working relationship, or can get to a working relationship. Sandra and I actually got there fairly quickly. We had never actually sung together until I jumped into Norma in San Francisco. I had been on second cast of Norma at the Met. She was first cast, so we never actually worked together. But here I was jumping in at the last minute in San Francisco, and it was like, well, here, you gotta do it. And luckily, we had already kind of socially known each other, and so it was just a really organic process. But Sandra is also one of those amazing colleagues. She will go there with you. She'll she'll chew the scenery with you if you really feel like you're getting a mouthful of wood. Like it's, she's an amazing colleague to work with, and I should just say I find that more often than not. A lot of people who are out there doing it are really, really interested in making it good. And so I think if you have two people, even if you don't know each other, if you have two people who are really dedicated to that, you can find a middle ground.
It's wonderful. One more question. Sir. Well, we'll take two, since you're all lines. Sir first, and I'll get to the front row.
Term storytelling probably 10 or 12 times during this whole. At what point in your singing artistry career did that concept of awareness peak? When did that develop for you? When did you start to?
The question, again for the live stream, is given Jamie's emphasis on storytelling, when did it occur to you? Did you realize that what the job was storytelling, or that's at least how you wanted to approach it?
To me, I think the first, the thing that comes to mind as the earliest kind of aha moment was when I had been doing recitals for a few years, mainly in academia, and then I went to see Dawn Upshaw in concert. And here was this performer who had a connection with her pianist that I had never seen before. And they were throwing these stories out there, and you were hooked line and sinker just in it. And I kind of thought, that's a different experience than just getting up there and singing this correctly. That's a completely different experience, and I kind of want to do that. So that was at Indiana, actually. I'd already gone all the way through undergrad, but she was really the one who got me thinking about storytelling being, so important. I do kind of say to younger singers, our job is not to be an opera singer or a classical singer or a recitalist or whatever. Our job is that of a storyteller. We just happen to have the palette that includes music. And so that is something that I am personally, you might have seen the soapbox somewhere over here. But once again, it comes down to, what do I want to see when I go to the theater,
It seems so obvious, but not everybody really puts it across.
I kind of think if, what's going to get me off of my couch? Am I going to put down Westworld and get out of the house and put on pants? It better be good. And that's reality now for every single person, isn't it? It kind of is. So you better make it good. Make it work.
The last question, Jennifer, in the front row.
You're a wonderful storyteller. You call it the hook. I call it touching the heart when I'm in the audience. How do you handle when you have the story and the librettist and composer has a story to tell, and the director has an idea that's mostly his ego, not many hers, that undermines your story, the librettist, and the composer?
It's a great question. It's certainly one that comes up in opera a lot, where the directorial approach may seem to you, Jamie, to run counter to what you see in the story. How do you handle that?
So I will say that in the time that I've been doing this, I kind of feel that I've been lucky that I've had mostly conductors and directors who have been on board with the story that they were given. There is one, and Michael would probably laugh at me because he knows exactly which one I'm thinking of, which is a story that I love very, very much, and it was a production that was absolutely not that story. And it was a struggle, I'm not going to lie. As an artist who was particularly in love with this story, it was a real struggle to get to a place where I could tell the story of that particular telling. But you do it. You go in there and you kind of just band together with the people that you're telling the story with, and everybody is doing it together. And as is the case with this particular one, hilariously enough, as much as my manager and I both love this story so much, and I love the classic telling of it, and so does he, I wasn't sure how it was going to come across, but I did my job. and I got in there, and I tried to tell the story along with the lines that they were putting this in, and I didn't quite believe it in my heart, but my manager was moved by it. And to me, that kind of spoke of unity. That spoke of the importance of being on board, even if it's not necessarily the way you would tell it. This brings back to why I love recitals. I get to tell it how I want to tell it. But sometimes there is an element of something that you may not like the greater picture, you may not be on board with it, you may not even understand it sometimes. But I think that there is always a kernel of something that you can pick up that makes sense to you. And if I can take that kernel and turn it into a story and make it make sense and be a part of it, then I feel like I'm doing my job in that particular situation. So.
Luckily, and it's not always that Opera News magazine takes its cues from Opera America, but in this particular instance they did, because on the cover of the brand new issue, the January 2017 issue of Opera News, is a picture of Jamie Barton, and I assume a lovely interview I haven't had a chance to read because I just got this at the end of the day today, but you can certainly read more about Jamie in the current issue of Opera News. Before we thank Jamie, I draw your attention again to January 13th, the date of the New Opera Showcase at Town Hall. But between now and then, we have holidays, and I hope you all have healthy and happy holidays. But above all, I hope 2017 is an extraordinary year for Jamie Barton. Thank you so much for being here.